Welcome back to the PFPod, the podcast where we break down the action, strategy, and excitement of robotics competitions like FIRST and beyond.
From last-minute pit fixes to championship-winning plays, we're here to talk about what makes robotics more than just a competition.
Whether you're a builder, coder, driver, or just love the energy of a great event, we've got stories, insights, and maybe a few battle scars to share.
So let's gear up, dive in, and talk about the world of competitive robotics.
Today we'll be discussing how to leverage FIRST in applications, whether for college or jobs. I'm Max.
I'm Lindsay.
And let's get into it.
But first, what is FIRST?
It's a great question, Lindsay.
FIRST Robotics is a global nonprofit organization that provides robotics programs for students in grades K through 12. The programs are designed to inspire students to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, and math, also known as STEM.
We talk all things FIRST in our pilot episode, so if you're curious for more information, feel free to go back there and listening to that episode.
But first, let's dive in, pun intended, to what we did this weekend.
This past weekend, we volunteered at the FTC State Championships at the University of Indianapolis, and it was quite a good time.
Yeah, we saw a lot of great teams. We actually saw team 12014 Firewires from Indiana win Inspire at the championship.
And the winning lines consisted of 11329 Ice Robotics and 9864 Jug Rocks Robotics.
So we're so proud of them. It was super cool to see all of them compete, and we wish them good luck in the future at Worlds.
Yeah, we definitely had a great group of PFP people come down there. Also met up with PFP Indianapolis students for a little dinner meet and greet afterwards as well. So really good time.
Yeah, we love to see you all and volunteer, and that's what we're all about.
Our community.
Yeah. All right, so diving into the world of leveraging FIRST on college apps, internships, things like that. There's a lot to offer. So we're going to start off with college applications and the best way to put FIRST on your application, because at the end of the day, if you just write FIRST Robotics on your application, college admissions don't always know what that is. And so it doesn't really tell the full story of what you've learned to do.
And it's never too early to start thinking about how you're going to portray yourself in college apps. So even if you're a freshman and sophomore, definitely stay attuned and kind of get that experience and kind of start compiling your list of achievements and stuff. So I definitely include a lot of FIRST stuff, especially in my supplemental essays. I know a lot of schools ask, like, why do you want to go into engineering, at least for me, who applied for engineering schools. And FIRST was a big reason why I was kind of wanting to go into that. So that's kind of what I talked about a lot in those kind of portions of the applications.
Yeah, I know for me, electrical engineering majors, engineering as well. I definitely relied on that a lot. Something I thought about before I even wrote my applications, though, was like what is my story and what perspective am I bringing to this? You really have to think about what perspective or lens you want to portray yourself. What is your story? And don't just think this past year. Think of the entire time that you've been in FIRST. That's something when our team, we would used to write our portfolio, you'd have to think about what you did that season. You want to think about, craft that story.
Yeah, I think it's really important to try to differentiate yourself, especially for other engineering applications. So kind of a good way I kind of went about doing it in my applications was talking a lot about the soft skills you learn from FIRST. Communication, leadership, kind of just general organizational project management skills. That's kind of relatively unique compared to other classmates who are just in regular engineering courses at school. So definitely really highlight kind of those areas as well, beyond just the technical skills.
Yeah, and something else, especially from having other people read and review my application, was that having FIRST jargon, especially for people you don't know who's going to read your application, that was something I kind of slowly over time got rid of. So rather than saying oh, my team won the Connect Award at States, I said that we received an award for connections with professionals in the STEM community at the state level.
Yeah, that's a great point, Lindsay. Many people kind of outside our FIRST community don't necessarily know all the nitty-gritty details, so kind of generalizing things to make it clear for anyone reading applications is definitely really important.
And something else that it took me a minute was you can't just say I did robotics, because yeah, that's what you did, but you did more than just that. You did networking, and you did time management, and you didn't just put a robot in your bedroom. And so I think that was something that at first when I started to sit down and write my application, I really had to think about was, okay, I need to convey that this is what I did, and it's not just me building a robot by myself in my basement. So,
And I think a helpful way to kind of branch together your ideas and kind of collect things is to think of different key moments in your first journey. What was your favorite moment you had in your workshop working on the robot? What do you think your biggest accomplishment was? Things like that to kind of get the ball rolling, and you can kind of piece those different stories together and create one cohesive kind of application.
I definitely agree with that for sure. Something else that I know was super daunting, especially when starting college applications, was Common App. But the Common App was really stressful at first when I looked at it because I had 150 words to describe my activities. And I don't know about you, but I did 6 years of robots. 150 words is not a lot of words. And so something I kind of learned over the course of like doing the applications is that you should also mix in that robotics experience into your big essays, your supplementals, as well as your like main Common App essay. You can tell a lot more than just what you did in 150 words then.
Yeah, there's definitely plenty of opportunities to kind of fit in first themes into your essays. And even if it's not explicit, like I did this robot thing, just kind of talking big picture stuff you learned. You don't necessarily even have to highlight this first aspect, just kind of general learning and growing.
Yeah, I know in my supplementals, especially for like engineering colleges, I got a lot of like, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to be this major? And so I know I relied on first a lot when doing those applications because then I got to talk about, I had this experience and that's why I want to pursue it.
So beyond just kind of the supplemental essays, another big portion of college applications and also I guess job application is your resume. And it's definitely really good to include first stuff there.
So Max, what is a resume?
That's a good point. So if you don't know exactly what a resume is, it's typically a one-page document that's job-specific or I guess college-specific as well in this scenario, with different history, education, skills, kind of other relevant information from your life. And then the CV is sometimes typically a little bit longer than the resume, some 2-3 pages as well. So it kind of just depends on the scenario, what you're applying for.
I feel like most of the time, jobs and colleges will look for a resume when you're first starting, rather than a CV. I feel like a CV is for like when you have a little more experience or applying to something that's a little more lengthy.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, PFP's advisor, who's great and does a ton of help with our resume reviews, she makes a good point where like an experienced professional with 40 years of experience fits his resume into one page. So like if you, a high school student, can't like, he has 40 more years of experience of different industry stuff. So if he can do it, you definitely can as well.
So just some tips on that actually. Do not go over one page because recruiters will most likely throw out your resume if you go over one page. And it's not front and back. It's one single-sided page, and don't include a photo of yourself because that also, most of the time, they have to throw out your resume.
Yeah, and it's also definitely a good thing to kind of think about your white space. You don't want it to be too text-heavy, but you also don't want it to be not text-heavy enough. So kind of striking that balance is definitely kind of tricky.
Yeah, I think it definitely takes a little bit of work and some practice, but there's definitely a lot of resources out there, too, that make it easier to format and learn how to use your resume.
And if you've never even seen a resume before, I bet you can ask one of your mentors or coaches if they can get a peek at theirs, and they can kind of get a little feel for it.
Yeah. Yep. But I will say there are some bad resumes out there. So the number one piece of advice I was actually given was do not go to Canva and download a resume template because it's usually not that good.
For sure. It's also really important what you put on the resume. Since you have such limited space, you want to be really specific with what you do and kind of really paint a picture of your life. You don't necessarily just want to say, like, participated in FIRST Robotics, because that's not really specific. I don't think many people actually know what that entails. So kind of getting more detailed and oriented and kind of highlight specific areas and tasks you were able to accomplish. Like, for instance, if you were kind of delegating lots of different tasks and managing your sub-team, you could say, like, I efficiently delegated tasks to complete a project with tight deadlines and interdependencies. So that kind of really highlights exactly what you're doing in a short, compact sentence.
Yeah. You can also say that, like, something else that I've learned is you want numbers and data on there. And so instead of saying you communicated with team members, you can say that you facilitated effective communication and collaboration among a diverse team of 10 members. That way it gives a concrete number. And because people could be like, okay, well, how many is team members?
For sure. You also say 125-pound robot. That's a big number. That's a lot of weight.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of paints the picture that's a very large robot and not necessarily just a small little thing.
The other thing is I've also been given the advice to think about the effect. So, like, if you effectively communicated, what were you able to do with that? So, adding on to the previous example, you could say, by communicating with those members, you're able to ensure that all the members were on the same page and working towards a common goal. So also like the effects of what you did can really help.
Yeah, and also another big thing is action words. I know that's definitely a big highlight if you talk to any guidance counselor, kind of career fair people, but that action verbs are really kind of critical to making things flow and kind of short, simple sentences like that.
Yeah, you'd rather use a descriptive verb than a descriptive noun, as well as you don't have to be in complete sentences. I actually don't think I have a single period on my resume.
Yeah, same here, looking over mine. Facilitate.
Yeah,
Love that
that's a good
one.
one. Yeah. Yeah, I just say that, don't put a full sentence on there and just try to most of mine are started off with a verb. So this one says collaborated with 5 teammates or developed STEM outreach or personal favorite, overhauled the marketing plan. Things like that, leading with that verb really gets the attention. And, I think that, like we said, the resume is not just important for applying to college, but also opportunities after college. Something that I found is having that first experience, even if I didn't directly say, oh, my first experience would be applicable to this role, being able to talk and socialize and interact in a professional environment has had a huge impact, as well as having a good resume.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if any of you have been to a career fair before or a job fair, but going up and talking to a recruiter is very similar to talking to a judge at a competition.
Or even going to PITS. Like my first career fair, we have something called Industrial Roundtable here at Purdue. And I showed up to IR that first day and I said, wow, this feels just like walking up to a team's PITS. It even looks like it. Folding tables and pop-up tents. But
for sure.
It's important to have a good resume so when you go talk to them, it explains what you do and what your strong suits are.
I also like to print mine out on a nice little thick extra piece of paper so when you hand it to them, it kind of stands out in the pile.
Yeah, and get yourself a nice folder so they're not crumpled or wrinkly, so they still stand out. But also, it's not just up to your resume. Also, networking is a huge component for getting a job or an internship or even connections and just getting to know people. And honestly, FIRST can help not just with skills, but actually making those connections. Talk to your local mentors. Talk to volunteers that you see a lot. Because volunteers have jobs too, and they're in fields.
Yeah, just kind of talking to adults at robotics competitions, whether they're mentors, coaches, volunteers, things like that. They're in a wide array of industries and a lot of different positions of power. I know lots and lots of people who've leveraged their connections through robotics to get jobs and actually careers too.
Yeah, and when you're talking, offer up if you're interested in something. Be like, I have a big interest in this, and just communicate, follow up with them, get a LinkedIn maybe. That way you stay in touch, and the FIRST community is strong. Everyone wants to help everyone, so.
Yeah, I know. I mean, interviewing for different jobs, I know recruiters who have been a part of FIRST themselves, and they see that on the resume, and they talk about their stories. Instead of having a full official interview, we kind of just talked about our first experience. So that's kind of a cool thing as well.
Yeah, I will say though, sometimes if I'm at a job fair, I don't go directly and say I was on an FTC team. I'll be like, oh, I was on a high school robotics team that was a part of FIRST Robotics. And I'll kind of lead into it. Because then if they ask more questions, then I'm like, oh, they're familiar with FIRST. But I don't assume that the recruiter is familiar. Because I've actually met a lot of recruiters who aren't.
Yeah, that's a great point, Lindsay.
Okay, so we are going to do rapid fire resume do's and don'ts. So that you guys can all improve your resumes. And hopefully go to college, get into a college of your choice and land the internship or whatever you're going for. So, do you want to start off, Max?
Do have multiple different sections that kind of outline your different parts of your experience, I guess.
Yeah, and going off with that, do label those sections. You don't want the recruiter to have to dig for where you went to college.
I guess it's also kind of a do/don't. A rule of thumb I've been told is if you are currently a student, your education section should be above your experience. And once you become not a student and a full-time employee, I guess, or professional, you put your experience above your education. So that kind of flip-flops.
Yeah. I've been told that you don't put your high school on your resume after you are in college because they're assuming that you graduated high school. Because if you're in college. So, especially if you need space, I've been told don't put your high school on there.
I've also been told do put dates and times of when you were working at different places so they can kind of get a whole picture of your
Yeah,
experience.
that definitely can make an impact. I say don't put full sentences. You're very limited on space, and there's really not a need for a full sentence. It's a lot more reading.
Also, don't add white characters with different keywords with hopes of getting past like an AI detector. I've talked to multiple recruiters who have seen that and then immediately just rejected your application.
But I do say I have a skills section so that like I can showcase like, I know a couple different coding languages. So if that's something that's specific to a job, then you can get that keyword in there.
Also, do make multiple different editions of your resume for different applications. Like, let's say if you're applying to a specific engineering job, you want to include different aspects to a different kind of thing you're applying to.
Yeah. Just a side tip in here. Personally speaking, I have a resume that's 2 pages long, and I call it like my running resume. And every activity I've ever done, I don't subtract anything from that resume. I just add to that resume. So then when I want to apply for somewhere or something, I can pick and choose the experiences that are most applicable to that and put those onto like a final resume for that position.
Also, don't use any kind of crazy fonts, Comic Sans, things like that. Keep it pretty professional, Arial, Times New Roman, things like that.
Also, don't include a picture. Don't include like colors or like shapes, anything like that. Yeah, anything fancy. Honestly, the pictures, a lot of companies legally have to get rid of your resume if you have a photo on it. So it's not just like preference when it comes to photos.
Also, definitely do leverage bold and italicization, kind of being able to differentiate different parts of text on your resume.
Yeah, you want the things that are most important to stand out for you. Do put contact information on there. However, don't put your address. Put your phone number. If you have a professional email, don't include your school email. Do like a Gmail or a personal email. And then I have my LinkedIn if you have a good LinkedIn, but you can do personalize your LinkedIn address.
And also, I don't know if this is necessarily do or don't, but if you're kind of towards the end of high school and graduating soon, make sure you check in with what happens to your school email once you graduate. A lot of people need to create a personal email and kind of have some of their job stuff there or college apps in case when you graduate you don't have access to your school email anymore.
Yeah, I'd say a big thing is to rely on a personal email over a school email for sure.
Definitely agree. And also make sure it's a professional one. You don't want any like football fan 9996.
Yeah, that'd be interesting for a recruiter to have to type in, for sure. Do put your name at the top of your resume. Put it in a bigger font, bold it, because at the end of the day, you want them to remember your name. So, it's an important one.
And also if you go by like a niche nickname not all the time, definitely put your full name just so they know actually how to contact you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't want any confusion on who you are and your experience.
For sure.
Something else that is a big component that students are often worried about when applying to colleges are letters of recommendation. I know I had to do like 3 letters of rec or something for colleges. And something is you want to first make sure you ask in advance. These teachers are getting so many questions. A rule of thumb I was told was like the first 2 weeks of your senior year, you should ask. Some people ask before summer. I think that's personal preference.
Yeah, I asked my teachers the end of junior year. And I also asked in person and then followed up with email and not just cold email them. So I came up to them in person and said like, hello, I really enjoyed your class. I think we made a good connection. I would love for you to write my recommendation letter. And I also included I made a little like kind of cheat sheet just so they have all the information about me firsthand. I touched a little bit on different projects I did within their course with them. I also talked a little bit about just my personal experience and just general information so they can kind of not have to write everything from scratch and take some kind of things to go with.
Yeah, I think I included my resume as well, just so that, they're not just writing, they were a lovely person to have in class, because while that's great, you also want them to have more to talk about. But yeah, I think also following up with them, teachers, coaches, people of that sort, educators get busy. And so giving them ample time, but also just, gently following up and saying, hey, like just checking in, how's it going? I think is a big one.
You also want to be sure to ask people that can and will give a good recommendation for you. You don't want to ask someone you don't have a great relationship with or you weren't the best student in their class because they won't write you a good recommendation. I definitely talked to lots of teachers after the fact, and like a lot of times they'll say yes to students even if they're not think they're a great fit, and they just kind of don't write a great recommendation
Just
letter,
mid.
and they just don't even really know. I know some teachers all say no, like I don't want to write you a recommendation, but
I know teachers who will say no because they have too many on their plate.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you do get a no, sometimes it's not because you're a bad student or something. It's just that you didn't ask soon enough.
For sure. But definitely think about teachers or coaches or mentors or kind of any adult trusted figures in your life. Not necessarily family, of course, but kind of someone who could actually write a good recommendation for you because you want to make sure it's personal and actually true, I guess.
Yeah, I think a lot of times students only go for teachers. And so I'm from a community FTC team. And so my coach is not involved in the school district at all. He's a physicist by trade. And I had him write my recommendation letter because I was like, you know me really well. Like, you've seen me throughout the years. And he wrote an amazing one. So.
Also, definitely check into your school because a lot of different ones require different things. Some require a STEM teacher from your high school. Some require a guidance counselor. So definitely check in with the requirements for what you need.
If after this episode you still have questions, you can always submit it down below in the PF portal and we will answer it for you.
There's also definitely a bunch of trusted adults in your lives, whether they're mentors, coaches, parents, guidance counselors, who definitely have gone through this process before and are great people to ask as well. So thank you again for tuning in this week. PF Parting is such tomorrow.
We'll see you next time.